You know you make me wanna kick my head up and throw my hands back and come on now, come on now, come on now.
So, I finally saw it. Final Destination Bloodlines came out on the 16th of May, but I had to wait for the 19th due to some scheduling difficulties. I'll just say it was definitely worth the wait. I decided to do a real review on it on this channel so that my friends and my family can be spared from hearing about it, though. I feel like there are two parts to a movie from a franchise, especially a franchise like Final Destination, and it's how good it is as its own movie and how good it is as an addition to the franchise. So we're going to talk about how it is as its own movie right now. And as its own movie, Final Destination Bloodlines is pretty good. One of the most important things about actors playing a family, like they really had to in this movie, is that they have to feel like a family and not just like a bunch of actors that are mushed together. And honestly, I think that Final Destination Bloodlines did a really good job of this. The sibling dynamic between the two main characters wasn't really forced, and the little group they had of the cousins really felt like a group of cousins, like in the way that they communicated and kind of fought with each other. It did feel like cousins. The actors really nailed all this, and I didn't once question how good the casting was or what the casting directors were thinking. I feel like I actually whispered to my friend in the theater, like, this is really good casting. And I also loved that they used newer actors. I've never seen any of these actors in anything, so maybe they're not very new, but it was really nice to see a new, fresh amount of faces in a movie instead of, like, just the three actors that movies really love casting right now. Also, rest in peace to Tony Todd, the actor of William Bloodworth. I never saw a lot of his stuff before Final Destination, but he was definitely my favorite part of all the movies, and it was pretty sad seeing like the in memory thing at the end of the movie. But yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. I do have one complaint about the actors that were cast. Final Destination movies need to stop casting attractive people, because I had to sit for 110 minutes next to my best friend who would turn to me and go, "Hear me out," every time the guy with piercings and tattoos came on screen. I'm not hearing you out. But I also really loved how the opening and the closing really came full circle. That was really cool. As I walked into the theater preparing myself to see this movie, I had one main concern that I had actually had for a few weeks. My main concern was that it was all going to end up as a kind of allegory for like generational trauma, because it's a family and bloodlines or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with having a movie tackle a hard topic like that, of course. But the thing is, Final Destination films are definitely not the time or place to put in some message about breaking generational cycles. They're really not meant to take themselves that seriously, and it's really just more of a fun place for kills and irrational anxiety. But the good news was I wasn't disappointed, and the movie was really just as cheesy and fun as the rest of them. It was really funny, and the kills were great. I was really happy that they kept it cheesy, because I feel like there's kind of a trend going on with movies that are coming out where they really try to take themselves seriously, and people just don't know how to have fun with movies anymore. Maybe I'm watching the wrong movies, but I really enjoyed the overall experience of this one. They didn't take themselves too seriously. Again, I've said that like 10 times, but it was cheesy, it was fun, and it reminded me of the older Final Destination films. I really liked them. One thing I was super happy about also was that they didn't specifically use the older films as kind of like nostalgia bait in the movie. Like, there were Easter eggs, and you can claim, I guess, that reviving the franchise is nostalgia bait in itself, but I feel like it was kind of a movie that had real care and work put into it so that it could really fit the feel of the franchise instead of just a movie with the Final Destination title slapped onto it. There were a lot of Easter eggs that seemed very lovingly added, including how in the MRI death, there was a scene, and it was very reminiscent of the Final Destination 5 poster, and that was a really fun Easter egg, and it didn't halt the plot or the kill, and it wasn't thrown in there just to be like, oh, look at this, like, yeah, remember this movie you loved? Like, yeah, we're referencing that. It was kind of just like an homage to the previous film. And I loved how they gave Bloodworth some more lore, and it all really felt tied together with the franchise itself. It didn't stick out or take itself too seriously, like I've said like 10 times, but it really felt like a Final Destination film. And then I'm going to go over some things that make a Final Destination film, and go over how Final Destination Bloodline fits these categories. So, a Final Destination movie needs a good start, a good premonition. That's like the basis of the movie. That's the whole point. They need a good premonition. And Final Destination Bloodlines had me on like the edge of my seat by the first minute, but that also could be because I get really irrational anxiety in movie theaters sometimes, but whatever. The key to a good Final Destination premonition is that it has to play on something people are already afraid of, I feel like. And this is why the fourth Final Destination movie didn't resonate with a lot of people, I think, because not many people are going to race car tracks, which is where the original premonition took place. And I've actually seen claims that the movie theater scene in that movie scares people more than the race car track. Maybe that should have been the original premonition. I'm gonna be honest. Maybe that should have been it. But the race car track feels like a specific demographic and not everyone fits in it. I know myself, I've never been to like a race car track. I've seen races on like TV, but I've never sat in a race car track and been like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. But planes, highways, and roller coasters, and even bridges are like a much more everyday thing that people fear. And I'm very aware that people don't go on planes or roller coasters every day, but I just mean that a lot of people hear horror stories about those things more often. And I actually made a chart from the data with Google Trends, which is where you can kind of search up how a search term is doing in like trends or whatever. But you can see a vast difference in interest relating to those types of tragedies. We can see that the interest in racetrack accidents is basically non-existent, and plane accidents are a little over roller coaster accidents, and bridge accidents and highway accidents are the most like searched, which really makes sense because those premonitions are ones that people talk about a lot. I feel like people talk about the roller coaster one too, but I was actually really surprised to see that the roller coaster accident thing wasn't higher. Maybe I didn't put in the right search term. But we aren't here to talk about Final Destination 4. That's a whole other video that I'm already working on. Now that I've seen the movie, I can actually research Final Destination stuff without getting worried I'm going to get spoiled by something. So I have a lot more Final Destination Final Destination themed videos kind of on my roster that I'm going to be putting out soon. But the point is that Final Destination 6 took the right route using the Sky Tower as the original disaster. And we can actually back up this fact that this choice was a good one with our data as well. And we can see that the bridge accidents is about like the second most searched tragedy in our data set. And that acrophobia, the fear of heights, it's a pretty common phobia. If you ask somebody what their like biggest fear is, a lot of people will say heights. And another premonition that has to do with heights is a pretty good choice, but it wasn't reused, you know? Because, I mean, a bridge and a tower aren't the same thing. But looking past the premonition itself, the setup is really good. I loved the kind of like period piece kind of thing. It was in like the 50s or 60s, but I really liked that. And you get enough information about the characters around to decide which ones you want to love and which ones you want to hate. You want Iris and the little boy that turns out to be Bloodworth to get out alive. And you also want that little kid with the pennies to get hit by a piano.
You know you make me wanna pick my head up and throw my head back and come on now, come on now, come on now, come on now, take it easy, take it easy, take it easy, take it easy.
One thing that I really adore about a good Final Destination film is the music. And one complaint I do have about Final Destination films is that I really need Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross to do a score for one of them. I hope that we get a Final Destination 7, and I really hope that they're the ones scoring it. but that's because the song Into the Void by 9 Inch Nails was the inspiration to the title for the franchise. But that could be wrong, don't quote me on that. But I really love Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and their score for the 2023 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie really introduced me to how good scores in movies could be. And I feel like their style would be really good for a Final Destination movie, but that could just be me. That could just be my bias. The soundtrack in Final Destination Bloodlines was really good either way. I think my favorite part of Final Destination films is how they'll have like the craziest deaths with the most tonally inappropriate song in the background. Rocky Mountain High from the first one is a great example of this, I think. Or the tanning bed scene with Love Roller Coaster. I love those. Those are just great. And if I did in a Final Destination movie, I think I would want to die to Blackbird by the Beatles. I think it really fits the vibe there. But when me and my friend walked out of the theater, we were dancing to the song Shout that played in the initial premonition. And I think the credits, it was great, and it inspired me to make the TikTok that I showed in the beginning of the segment. So the moment you've all been waiting for, the kills. So I think the kills were really good, and I'm probably gonna make a whole other video about it because this video is getting a little longer than I want to edit. But I want to mention the MRI scene specifically because the whole time my friend was just yapping to me about how hot they thought Eric was, and by the end of that scene, they turned to me with like the most horrified expression on their face. And I was laughing, but that scene is exactly what I come to a Final Destination movie to see. Something like insane, like just crazy. MRIs are kind of scary, honestly, if you think about it. The magnets is, but yeah, that just increased my fear of them tenfold. But Death was really petty in that one because he wasn't even supposed to die, but Death was just being petty, like they always are. And it was honestly the best death in the film, and there was a Final Destination 5 reference, so 10 out of 10, no notes. I think that I'll most likely be giving Final Destination Bloodlines a solid 4 stars on Letterboxd, 4 out of 5. I do tend to rate movies I saw in theaters just a little higher just because of the experience of seeing them in a theater. I love movie theaters. But this movie was just a super fun experience, and it was such a good addition to the franchise. And I think that 4 out of 5 is a solid rating. But I will be coming out with a video soon about what I thought Final Destination 4 did wrong, because I hate Final Destination 4. And also, I'll go through the kills in Final Destination 6 one by one and give more thorough reviews of them and my thoughts on them. So, see you guys later. Look out for those.